Good evening, my name is Randy Noble, and welcome to the Sunday evening edition of The Cross in the Desert. And this is a weekly internet program speaking hope and freedom to my friends in Iran. I want to talk to you this evening in the brief time that we have the subject of religious intolerance in Iran. Just a few months ago, in September of 2012, Pastor Yusuf, an Iranian Christian pastor who had been on death row for over 2 years because he converted from Islam to Christianity, was finally miraculously released through the efforts of Jay Sekulow and the American Center for Law and Justice. He was released after being on death row for a long time and reunited with his family. Now, we've seen in so many cases throughout Iran that Muslims that become Christians are targeted by the government and can be put to death or executed simply because they converted from Islam to Christianity. There is so much religious intolerance in Iran against Christians, those of the Baha'i faith, and many other religious minorities. Well, not to be undone with releasing Pastor Yusuf after being under so much pressure from Americans speaking out, the Iranian government has once again moved in to harass and to really come out against Christian pastors in Iran. And this time they've targeted an American citizen. That's right. His name is Pastor Saeed Abendini. I think that's pronounced correctly. He has a wife and a child residing in Idaho in the United States. Now, a little bit about Pastor Saeed. He once lived in Iran, and 13 or more years ago, he converted from Islam to Christianity and began working in the underground house church movement. Well, at some point in time, he was arrested a few times because of his involvement and finally made his way out of Iran and migrated to the United States. Subsequently, after that, he became an American citizen and met his wife there. Her name is Nengama. Nengama is also a convert from Islam to Christianity, and she too became an American citizen. So they are both American citizens. Now, because of his involvement in the house church movement, Pastor Saeed has traveled back and forth to Iran, and the government has warned him steeply not to be involved in this. He's been arrested several times. So at a point in time, Pastor Saeed, thinking of his family and his safety, agreed not to become involved in going to the underground church. And instead, he traveled back and forth to visit his family. Well, just recently, back in September, as a matter of fact, he was arrested by the Iranian government and charged by acting against national security against Iran, and was put in prison and began the torture, the solitary confinement, which is always practiced against those of the Christian faith, those that so-called are walking against the government. Now, since then, the American Center for Law and Justice has become involved in Pastor Saeed's case. It's once again an example of religious intolerance against Christians in Iran. What I want to do is read a statement to you from the president of the American Center for Law and Justice, an article he wrote. This is Jay Sekulow. He writes, "Our worst fears have been realized. This morning in Tehran, on an empty promise that American pastor Saeed Abendini might be released, his lawyer came to court. The lawyer had no formal notice that his presence was required, only the casual request less than 24 hours before from a court administrator to a family friend that the lawyer should come to court because it was releasing Pastor Saeed. But this was all a lie. Upon arriving at the court, Dr. Nazar Sabazi, Pastor Saeed's lawyer, saw his client. He knew he had been deceived. Without family presence, Judge Pir Abbasi of Branch 26 of the Iranian Revolutionary Court, he's known as the hanging judge, verbally convicted and sentenced Pastor Saeed to 8 years in prison for threatening the national security of Iran through his leadership in Christian house churches. The evidence provided was of Pastor Saeed's Christian activities primarily during the early 2000s, when under President Khatami, house churches were really not perceived as a threat to Iran. Despite Iranian law requiring a written verdict, none was given. Here's the troubling reality in this case. A U.S. citizen who has been beaten and tortured since his imprisonment last fall, is now facing 8 long years in Evin Prison, which is one of the most brutal prisons in Iran. Now, Jay writes, "We represent Pastor Saeed's wife, Nagama, and her 2 children who live in the U.S. Upon hearing about this injustice, Nagma said the promise of his release was a lie. We should not trust the empty words or promises put out by the Iranian government. These false hopes amount to nothing more than psychological torture. You don't want to trust them, but they build a glimmer of hope before they deliver the crushing blow. With today's development, I am devastated for my husband and my family. We must now pursue every effort, turn every rock, and not stop until Saeed is safely on American soil again." And that is a statement from his wife, Nagma. We know that with the Iranian Revolutionary Court, Pastor Saeed's conviction and sentence had to be approved at the very top. That is, the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, had to sign off this verdict. Iran has not only abused its own laws, it has trampled on the fundamentals of human rights. We call on the citizens of the world to rise up in protest. We call on governments around the world to stand and defend Pastor Saeed. As his wife has pleaded, starting with our own government, every effort must be pursued. We are calling on the State Department and the White House, which have both called for Pastor Saeed's relief, to engage in this further. This is a real travesty, Jay writes. A U.S. citizen faces a lengthy prison term for simply because he's a Christian. Pastor Saeed now faces 8 years in a harsh prison, likely facing life-threatening torture and abuse at the hands of the Iranian regime. We must pray and speak out in behalf of Pastor Saeed and his family. You can get involved on a very practical way, first by praying. That's the most important thing you can do. But also come to my Facebook page, Randy L. Noble. You scroll down and you will see a petition you can sign in a practical way and be a voice for this pastor and his wife and child. You know, much has been accomplished through the American Center for Law and Justice and Jay Sekulow, through Twitter, through speaking out, for signing petitions. And so this is a very grave situation. This is a man who simply is practicing his Christian faith. He's a citizen of the United States. He has simply gone over to Iran to visit his family that still lives there. He's committed no crime. There is such religious intolerance in a nation that claims to follow the Quran. And would you be surprised to learn that in several places in the Quran, it's very clearly stated in many places, there shall be no compulsion in religion. There shall be no compulsion in religion. In other words, religion cannot be forced upon you according to the Quran itself. Well, this is a nation that claims to be Islamic and follows the Quran, but in reality, they're denying their own holy book by holding this man against his will simply because he converted from Islam to Christianity. So sad, so very sad and tragic, but through prayer and through signing petitions, you can be a voice for Pastor Saeed and his family. Now, I want to end our program this evening on a very beautiful note. And this is a picture of my new Facebook friend, Caspian Makan. Caspian Makan is the fiancé of Neda Sultan. Neda Sultan, if you remember, was murdered during the 2009 presidential election. She simply went out to protest against the election, and she was with friends, and she was gunned down by a Basiji member, a paramilitary organization in Iran. And the government never did anything to resolve this case. Very, very sad case. But because of Neda's martyrdom, and she spoke the truth, she stood up for her country in a peaceful way. Because of this, millions of Iranians have rallied behind the memory of Neda Sultan to speak out against the hypocrisy and the intolerance of the government in Iran. So Neda has become a symbol of hope and freedom in Iran. In this beautiful picture is a celebration of her 30th birthday. Had she lived, she would have been 30 years old. And if you can see this, this is Caspian looking up at a picture of Netta, and there's a table with candles and rose petals, and in the far left corner a picture of Freedom Towers. Caspian is very, very much involved in a human rights organization in Canada, is very successful in speaking out for freedom. And I'm very honored that he is reading my book, The Rose of Nowruz. This is a book I wrote for my friends in Iran to talk about the intolerance, the oppression and fear of the government. And I'm pleased to say this book has been sent out in many, many places in Iran. Many Iranian university students are enjoying this story, the story of hope and freedom. It's a story that I encourage you to read if you get an opportunity. All you have to do is come to my Facebook page. Leave your email address and I will send this to you freely. Most importantly, I want to get the message of the plight of my Iranian friends out to human rights organizations all over the world. I care about them deeply as people. These are decent, honest people trying to make a difference in their country, trying to make a difference in the world. They're going to university, they're studying hard, and they're under strict laws all the time, denied the freedoms that you and me enjoy on a daily basis. And that's why in 2 weeks I'm going to have a book signing for The Rose of Nowruz at Family Christian Bookstore, and have an opportunity to hand out Iran 30 prayer guides, then talk about my friends, and I'll be showing the documentary film A Death in Tehran. There's Netta Sultan. This is a documentary film produced by PBS showing just the horrible consequences of her peaceful protest. It was a video that everyone in the entire world saw as Netta lay dying in the streets of Tehran. So many good things have come out of her tragic death, and I just want to say that she's an inspiration to me. I dedicated my book to Netta, The Rose of Nowruz, as well as Behera Hedayat and Nazrin Sotoudeh, the women freedom fighters in Iran. It really is a pleasure to talk about this subject with you, because I know that through the many programs, the many books written, the many petitions signed, we're going to make a difference. My whole goal in doing all this is so that my friends in Iran can have a better life, can see their dreams fulfilled, to not have to be under the impression and the fear of daily life in Iran. My goal is to speak for them, to be their voice, so that one day they can walk down the streets of Tehran without fear. They don't have to worry about the things they say, the thoughts they think, the clothes they wear. They can enjoy freedom like you and me enjoy and we take for granted every day. So in order to become involved with speaking out for my friends in Iran, just please come to my Facebook page, Randy L. Noble. You'll see many, many postings there about the situation in Iran, the situation with the bloggers and the political prisoners. You'll see postings to keep you up to date with what's happening there. I really appreciate your time spending here on the cross in the desert. I'm going to see you again in 2 weeks. I want to say God bless you and have a wonderful week, and I'll see you on the next edition of The Cross in the Desert. Good night, and God bless you.